Hello everybody, Simon Dixon here again. Today we're going to be discussing after a court appearance Chapter 11 extravaganza that Celsius owns our money. And if you're in BlockFi, and if you're in FTX, and if you're in Genesis, and if you're in Voyager or any of the others, you're going to find that this is going to become one of the preeminent issues in these Chapter 11 cases. So today I'm going to be going through a number of videos and some history because in the court hearing today, to keep you up to date, Celsius have very kindly decided that after bait and switching the terms and conditions, that they own all money in Celsius and all of our funds belong to them, with the exception of a few people, and a little bit of people got to get their money out, which I am very happy for you. Congratulations. But it also means that they set the precedent that Celsius owns all funds and they are officially a bank without a license. And so we're going to be going through that today. And this is a particularly hot issue for me for a number of reasons, because it's pretty much been my lifetime work. In 2006, I left investment banking because I was outraged by the concept that when you deposit your money at a bank, the bank becomes a legal owner. So much so that I quit my job and gave tours all around the world and spoken about 200 different colleges and universities, and even wrote this book here and found Bitcoin just because it gave people the way to transact without the bank owning your own money. So Bank to the Future, Protect Your Future Before Governments Go Bust was really written because banks own our money when we deposit it at a bank, and I wanted to educate people on the consequences and how that relates to the system that we are in today. Ironically, we found that in the court today, a few things, not today, this week, a few things happened. Firstly, it's very likely that Celsius and Kirkland & Ellis, the legal team, have won the case to prove that our money belongs to them, which has a few consequences, which we'll be covering today. It means that they can spend it and they can get court approval to force us to invest it in their new startup. But it also means very bitterly that the Unsecured Creditors Committee, who are representing our interests, have told us that it's beneficial for Celsius to own our own money for various reasons that we'll cover in this as well. So it's a very bitter pill to swallow. And the judge knew that as well. And the judge was fighting off anybody that wanted to submit evidence. In fact, they gave us the grand total of 15 seconds to tell us if anyone wants to submit some evidence. And they didn't, some of the per se creditors didn't realize until the end that their opportunity to submit evidence had passed. And the judge told us that despite the fact that Alex Mizhinsky told us publicly that the money is legally ours, it was too late to be submitted into evidence. And the judge may be representing our interest because he's been doing that consistently. Plus also the Unsecured Creditors Committee said that they backed the motion that Celsius owns our money in order to try and represent our interests. So I'm going to be going through the background, and it's really important. If you are from FTX, if you are from Voyager, you've already done that really early in the case. Voyager got funds in custody back because it was held at a bank, and the rest belonged to Voyager that they get haircut on. It will certainly be a big issue in FTX and BlockFi, and you can learn from what we're experiencing in Celsius. So I'm going to rewind back and I'm going to play some videos that really help you understand why this is such a hot topic, going from way back when I wrote this first published book and spoke at the very first Bitcoin conference in the world based upon this issue of our right to fight for our money. Now, the reason this is really important is because if it turns out that in your Chapter 11 case, it is beneficial for the company that stole your money to own your money, then at least at the other side of that, you need to fight and make sure that you get your money back. And that's the theme of this event. So just before I jump into some of those videos to give you the backdrop and the history in these Chapter 11 cases, do me a favor, hit the like button and also put a little comment if you're watching on YouTube. Tell me where you're tuning in from. and why it's important to you to fight for your own money. And YouTube will send us some love, and the algorithms will get more people to this, because there are millions of creditors that are not watching these videos, and we need to ensure that they don't fall and get caught in the same trap that we got caught in with Celsius. So if you know any creditors of any of these Chapter 11 cases, please do share it on social media and share it with other people as well, so that they know that they need to fight for the right to own their money. Something I've been doing for approximately 2 decades now, ever since I discovered how the banking system works. So it turns out that those t-shirts that said banks are not your friends were exactly what they were doing, and they bait and switch the terms and conditions, and they didn't even have the regulations and the licenses to do it. And so much, much bigger than banks not being your friend, Celsius wasn't your friend, FTX is not your friend, BlockFi is not your friend, and Voyager's probably not your friend too, as we get through these Chapter 11 cases. So I'm going to go to the screen share. I'm going to make sure that the sound comes through, and Azad's going to interrupt if the sound doesn't come through, but I want to rewind back to 2011. Look at that young Simon Dixon there, looking a lot slimmer, a lot healthier, and having a lot more energy, because I just quit my job in investment banking and spent years presenting on the troubles with banking, and spoke at the first Bitcoin conference here in 2011. And guess what the price of Bitcoin was? $3. It crashed to $3 around this time as well. So I'm just going to help you understand why this is such a passionate issue for me. So at the first Bitcoin conference, I laid the land of why Bitcoin was such an important innovation based upon the way that banks have done, and I covered in my book, Bank to the Future, over the last 2 centuries. They changed the laws and they bait and switch the terms and conditions on everybody so that the banks own your money. And then lots of laws and regulations were introduced because of all the unsustainable blow-ups and the equivalents that can happen as a result of it. So let me just give you the 3 underlying principles from the very first Bitcoin conference in Europe in 2011, with the younger, fitter, slimmer Simon Dixon presenting.
And I believe that the reason that these industries have not been disrupted is purely because of the way money is actually created. And that's why me as a banking reformer, we look to change the rules of money and banking. Because although I'm very excited about creating an entrepreneur revolution and alternatives, I also know that there's got to be things that happen at the governmental level in order for these things to go through, with the exception of a few things. And one of those is creating a complete alternative currency, such as Bitcoin. So there's 3 flaws that we believe in banking, and I just want to touch upon these briefly because they lay into what I'd like to speak for the rest of the presentation. The first is this, and this is why those 3 industries have not been disrupted, and they won't be disrupted until these 3 flaws are looked at. The first is this, not many people know this, but when you deposit your money with a bank, they become the legal owner of your money. So it actually becomes legally their money. The second thing is that once it becomes legally their money, banks decide how they spend it through issuing loans. So really, the banks are deciding and allocating by the way, 97% of our money is being allocated by banks. And so if it's not drawing a profit, then they'll put it to the unsustainable nature or whatever it may be. But they're really dictating where almost all of our money in our nation actually is spent. And the third thing, which we think is the third flaw of banking and the reason why we have such industries that can't get disrupted, is because banks actually create money. So you may not know this, or you may know this, but when you go and borrow a mortgage, essentially that's just brand new money created out of thin air by a bank. In the UK, we have a system, a legal system, whereby banks can simply create as much money as people will borrow and their appetite to lend to them. So really, there's only 2 things dictating where money goes in our economy. One is if someone's willing to lend, if someone's willing to borrow and they have the credit rating which meets the criteria of a bank. And secondly, whether they can find people to borrow that money.
Okay, so you get the point. These are the 3 fundamental principles that I discussed around the way that banks create money. So banks own it, they spend it, and it sounds exactly like what happened with Celsius in many of these cases. So they fight in order to say that they own the money, and then they spend it on VC investing or hedge funds. And then when they lose it and those bets go wrong, they just simply create up some synthetic balances and then tell us once they go bankrupt, oh, by the way, we don't have that money anymore. It was just a balance. So if you log into your app, you see that balance, but the money doesn't actually exist. I'm going to forward you to another presentation that I gave as well. And this is the same year, 2011, where I was sharing a future vision for banking and how you fix this when we first were trying to apply for a bank by making it where you can own your money in custody and it's separated through investing it in securities and they are fully segregated. So this was the foundational principles when we set up Bank to the Future to ensure that people own their money and that this invested in securities. Therefore, we needed new technology in order to achieve that goal because the banking system didn't allow us to achieve it. So I'm just going to play this video for you.
But Bitcoin is essentially a decentralized alternative currency that's making huge progress. And what they've actually done is they've created, so this is a completely competing currency. So when Steve was speaking this morning, he was talking about a system where you allow competing currencies to come along and people choose which type of system or how they want to use their money. And what Bitcoin have actually done is they've now innovated further where merchants and shops can actually use that virtual currency using your mobile phone, and the next version of iPhone and the smartphones will have a little a screen on it which is near field communication where you can tap it, you can spend it, and it prints off this little piece of paper with what's called a QR code on it. And when you scan that QR code and you take a little photo of that QR code, it goes into your account and you can spend it as money. They've also, for those who wanted physical money, they've created coins which you can order, and they've put a hologram in the middle of the coin. So people can go out there and use the hard currency as well for those who are into the hard currency thing. So there's some real interesting, and this is actually one of the only ways of actually opting out of the banking system. That you can do. I'm not here to say where.
Okay, so this is when I was first educating people how they can opt out of the banking system. For those of you that are complaining about user experience, we used to have to print off pieces of paper, educate people what QR codes, because that was a new innovation, and then also have physical hard Bitcoin just to explain how this thing works. Now, in that presentation, I referred to Steve. That was Steve Baker. He was the first Bitcoiner member of parliament. And this led to his presentation. This has gone full circle because when our prime minister resigned, I was trying to get it where Steve Baker was in. But I just want to give you one of those early presentations where Steve Baker, after this presentation, a very early Bitcoiner member of parliament, one of the onlys that understood money, actually helps people understand that because banks own their own money and because what we've experienced with Celsius, people are creating alternatives that exist outside the system.
I just would point out that Walter Bagehot is often prayed in aid of the current system. If one reads Lombard Street, he didn't actually support central banking. He thought it was useless to try and propose any change. But what we see today is that with alternative currencies like Bitcoin spontaneously emerging, it is now possible through technology that in a generation we won't all be putting our money in a few big mega banks held as liabilities issued out of nothing.
So that was really one of our very first ones. So we were really trying to educate members of parliament that banks own your own money, banks spend your own money, and banks create money, and educate them on the Bitcoin alternative. Okay, so then in the same presentation, I went into a bit more about trying to understand the difference between investment accounts and custody. Now, when you come to these chapter 11s, you will find that this is a very important distinction. And in these chapter 11, they're trying to claim that they are unlicensed banks. Now, remember, you have to have a banking license in order to own people's money and you have to have all those protections that come with a banking license, even though it is a Ponzi scheme backed by another Ponzi scheme called fiat currency. So I just want to share with you, way back in 2011 again, on making this distinction and warning people about the difference between custody and investment accounts.
Now, the longer vision, and what we're kicking off the process right now, is to actually implement the model of moving towards banking. So we want to apply for a special banking license, fairly similar to what the Octopus card achieved. And what we want to do is take current accounts, but we don't want to become the legal owners of that money. We want to deposit it with the Bank of England, and we want to charge for that, essentially, because we're not going to take any risk with your money. It needs no government guarantee. It needs no bailout. It's safe money, essentially. And we want to, so we want to offer that alternative. And then what we'd like to do is give the opportunity for people to take risk with that money. And that's where we would move them across into an investment account, and the investment account will all be invested in the peer-to-peer and various other products within that. So that's the model, but what I wanted to share with you, what's important, is there's some fundamental principles that I think as banking reformers will allow us to put the message out there and make some kind of sustainability. The first thing is the money will be yours. It won't be our money, and we're looking at the legal structures of how to actually do that. The second thing is that you will always know what your money is used for, because you can either allocate it, or if you elect to be automatically matched with investments, then you will be entered into a community where you actually interact with all the people that you're investing in, and you actually get to see that direct. The third principle is that we will only support production, and this is really important to us. We won't give you loans in order to buy shoes, because we want to only support the productive, and we'll be integrating some kind of social formula into our credit model as well of who we actually accept. But this is not for, if you want to borrow money in order to go on a holiday, this is not for you. We only want to contribute to something that goes into the productive economy and makes a difference in the world. And the other thing is that we will not use our banking license when we get it. Now, there's massive challenges ahead in order to get it, but I believe that we're moving in the right direction. So we do not want to create money. And what we really wanted to achieve with this is the mission of having a working model for how a sustainable bank could actually work, starting with what isn't a bank, essentially, in order to get to where we want to go, and gradually move the business model in that direction. And I'm fortunate enough, we're looking at also integrating with the alternatives. So what we wanted to do is run two models side by side. One which uses the existing banking system in a sustainable way. However, it can't be fully sustainable, because we all know that we're in the credit-created monetary system where banks create money as credit, and that's going to collapse. So we're going to be collapsing altogether if that happens. But we also want to integrate in a model with virtual currencies for those who want to completely opt out of the banking system altogether, so that people can gradually make that transition.
Okay, so this was a really early vision. Yikes, I didn't like the whole thing about using social media as credit. Certainly didn't appreciate the importance of privacy back then, which I do today. But really just that, we needed Bitcoin and virtual and this whole stable coins essentially to be created in order to make this vision become a reality. So now let's right forward to where we are today. And so now we've got the Celsius case, the SBF case, the FTX cases, and now we essentially had all this innovation. We created money that we could own, money that we could spend, and money that has a fixed supply. And then we were told in 2017, everyone started printing money and coming up with alternative ideas. So when I originally saw the pitch for Celsius, essentially it was pitched as that peer-to-peer model. So let's have a look at how the model changed, basically based upon what happened in the court hearing. So let's have a look. This is the founder of Celsius, Alex Majinsky. Some of the original pitches that were essentially, when I saw that, the presentations of a peer-to-peer model, and rather than actually them becoming a bank and then not having a license to have it. So I now want to submit the things that we are not allowed to submit in court, unfortunately, because it's now in our interest for Celsius to own our money, but we still need to fight for it at the end.
So P2P for me stands for power to the people. I know there's been 100 attempts to date from people to build peer-to-peer platforms, and many people in the room probably have either borrowed from them or lent through them. All of those platforms lend at double-digit rates. Our goal is to give the community loans at sub 9% rate. We charge you 9% to withdraw dollars against your crypto. We pay the community 5% of that. The difference is our operating cost. If we get 100 million members, our cost is probably going to be 1%. So we will be lending at 7% and paying you 5 or 6%.
Okay, so that was the original thing that we were pitched, that it's peer-to-peer, they're matching people up, but it turns out that they were actually changing the terms and conditions in order to own your own money so that they could create money, rehypothecate, and the model switched. And now we're told that because we agreed to those terms and conditions, the money belongs to Celsius. But if that's what's right, we need to make sure we fight for our money at the end and that it's not forced to invest. Okay, so now let's move things a little bit forward as well. We were told in the court today that Celsius definitely, not today, this week, that Celsius definitely owns the money. And this whole thing about legal ownership.
How do I know
So
you'll
let's
be
have a quick
around to
listen.
return the Bitcoin?
So when you give us Bitcoin, it's not like it's ours, right? It's yours. Legally, it is still your Bitcoin. The only thing we do is when you lend us your Bitcoin, we lend them to people who pay us interest. When they return them, it goes back to the wallet and it's still yours from that wallet. So the question is really, is the wallet insured? And you hear all over the place people saying, I have insurance, I have insurance.
Thank you. So
Okay, so that's the video that was not submitted in court because we were only given 15 seconds, where essentially Alex says that the money is ours. Prior to that, he said it's a peer-to-peer model, and we voluntarily opt in. This is why you need securities laws and custody laws. Custody means that it is your money, and then with securities, you have to get full disclosure, full transparency on what's happening with your money, and then they can invest it for you because you understand the risks and they ensure the suitability. But obviously that was just done without that. Or they can own your money, which is called a bank. It's a banking license. It allows you, when you deposit your money with the bank, as I've said, they become the legal owner. But when some of the per se creditors tried to say, but they didn't have a banking license, so how can they own it? They were told, overruled by the judge, because I think the judge essentially is going with the UCC argument that it's in our interest. Now, what happens with that money once it is actually, so let's say that we now agree that what we were told is not true. So what actually happens with our money? Well, Peter Schiff tried to get to the bottom of that answer. So let's have a look at what actually happens. Remember what we said. The first principle is that banks, to have a banking license, when you get a banking license, they own it. The second is they can spend it as they choose in order to try and generate profits for the bank.
Bitcoin pays dividends, Peter. Bitcoin pays dividends. Price Celsius.
How does Bitcoin pay a dividend? How does Bitcoin pay a dividend?
Because we earn yield.
How do you earn yield on Bitcoin? What do you do to generate income on that Bitcoin?
I'm happy to spend an hour with you.
Yeah, you're trading it. You got to be taking tremendous amount of risk. The Bitcoin itself doesn't generate any yield.
It does, just like any other asset can generate yield. Gold.
No, but what earnings does the Bitcoin generate?
Gold generates 5.5% at Celsius yield.
No,
tokenized
what
gold
are you doing to generate that?
5.5%.
You must be taking tremendous risk to generate those returns. Of course you are.
Okay.
You're not. Of course you must be.
Look, I'm not giving financial advice. I'm just explaining that this is
interest rates are practically zero. How can you get 5% interest on gold?
It's an amazing opportunity for people to unbank themselves, right? Take advantage of this market.
You know who also had an amazing opportunity? Bernie Madoff had an amazing opportunity too. Yeah.
I am placing a bet that Bitcoin will be above 150,000 by tax day, by April 15th, we will see Bitcoin going at or above 150,000. It will take a correction after that.
Okay, so remember the fundamental rules of banking. They get to own your money and they get to spend it. So, that's exactly what we got confirmation of here, that Peter was trying to do. So Alex Majinsky decided that because Bitcoin was going to go up to 150,000, he would play VC with our money and he would play hedge fund with our money. Okay, but at least he bait and switched the terms and conditions so that Celsius actually owns it and got us to voluntarily opt in. So what's next? Well, let's have a look at the types of things that are happening with our good friend SBF at FTX. So again, FTX's terms and conditions state that actually money on custody is in fact theirs and it's clear, is in fact ours and it's clear to that, but then they co-mingle it with margin trading and various other products. And we end up with, on the Twitter Spaces with Elon Musk, where Ran and myself were trying to get the answer.
Yeah, so it sounds to me like
between futures and spot, where those were commingled, right?
That's right. Yeah, in general, balances were treated as effectively fungible with each other.
Okay, now wait. I just want to with that in mind, I just want to try and understand something. So I put money on. I want to deposit money into FTX. I deposit money into Silvergate Bank, which is a United States bank. I put the money into the bank. That money lands up in Alameda's bank account, right? So now you've got. Let's say I take $100. I deposit $100 into FTX, but what I actually do is I'm depositing into Silvergate's account on Alameda, and the account name is Alameda. So now Alameda has $100 of my money, and then I want to buy a Bitcoin for let's say I put $20,000 in, and I want to buy a full Bitcoin. The money is. Tell me where the money's sitting now, though, because this is the part that I'm confused about.
Yeah, I'm not surprised you're confused because it's confusing, and it confused me, and there were a lot of poor decisions made there on our part.
So if you didn't get to watch the CoffeeZilla interview where he really drilled down, essentially there were synthetic Bitcoins that didn't exist because the money in custody was commingled with the money that was lent out and on margin. And therefore, when people wanted their money, it wasn't there because it was an illegal bank again. So let's go to the next thing, because remember, there's the first two principles that I covered in the Bitcoin conference. What about the third one, money creation? So let's have a look at what we got here.
A run on Celsius, like there would be on a run on a bank.
Yep, I'll take it. Oh, you got it. I'll take it. So a run of the bank, normally, because banks have fractional reserves, they lend 20, 30, 50 times more than the money they have. There is a run on the bank. A run on the bank cannot happen at Celsius because Celsius never lends more than what it has, right? We cannot do, legally, we're not allowed to create money or do fractional reserves. So at any moment, we always have enough coins and enough collateral and so on to return all the assets to all of our users. And every day we have a process, the daily reconciliation process, where our team, like 20 or 25 people, get on a call and grind through all the tokens and all the coins and make sure that we have more coins than what we owe the community, right? That's our process. And no bank in the world can do that for you because they never have enough assets to return for you if there is a run on the bank. Next question.
Okay, so it turns out that if we're currently in this situation right now, then how did they end up with less Bitcoin than the Bitcoin that they owe? Clearly, they were engaging in activities that Alex Majinsky confirmed, is not allowed to actually engage in either. So let's have a look at what was happening over at SBF, at FTX, sorry.
Yeah, or another way of phrasing that.
Because otherwise you would have had to have the USDC somewhere.
Right, yeah. I believe that what you're saying is in fact part of what happened.
Chet, do you want to continue?
Because that makes sense as to why there were no more Bitcoin.
Sorry, it's on repeat. That was SBF confirming after Rand said that the USDC is not actually there, and therefore they did end up owing more clients than money that they had. And so put all these three things together, you essentially have a bunch of people that use the cryptocurrency industry in order to recreate banking, but without any of the protections or regulations that are happening in banking. When you deposited it, they essentially said, we're the legal owner of the money. And then they commingled that, and rather than disclosing through securities, they simply invested and played VC and played hedge fund. And then when those bets went wrong, they ended up having a more synthetic cryptocurrency than what they owed to their depositors or creditors. And now they are unsecured creditors. Now, don't worry, it's all okay. In the end, we can have this model, and but we're going to figure out another model. So this all goes full circle, where our new prime minister in the UK is saying, yeah, forget about that. We won't let banks own their own money, spend their own money, and create it bet by debt. Instead, we're going to create our own thing. So this is where it all goes full circle before we move over to the AMA.
Today, I'm proud to say that under the UK's presidency, the group of the world's 7 most advanced economies, the G7, is launching a set of public policy principles for retail central bank digital currencies, CBDCs. Central bank digital currencies could be a digital version of money, a bit like a digital banknote that could be used alongside physical notes and coins. Unlike most of the digital money people use daily today, it would be issued directly by a central bank, like the Bank of England in the UK. And governments and central banks across the world are working together, looking into what having a digital currency might mean in practice. This includes...
Okay, so enough of all that. I'm going to head over to... I've had enough of the videos and screen shares, and we're right on the half-hour mark. So in summary, it was a really, really sad week for us, and it turns out that we need to suck it up, do that anyway, because now we're at a stage where the best way for us to try and get our funds back is to admit that they belong to Celsius. So officially, at the end of this court, once these proceedings, Celsius owns our money. Celsius can apply to the court to spend our money, and Celsius created more money than exists, just like FTX, in a slightly different version. Celsius bait and switched the terms and conditions, and so now their lawyers have proven by returning a small amount of funds to those that had the funds in custody, the way that I was describing, and how we segregate things at Bank to the Future. And rather than entering into voluntary investments where you have full disclosure, those coins can be sold in order to invest in their new startup. And so what we're fighting for right now is using the 3 different processes. If you go back to some of my previous videos, I did one on exiting Chapter 11 and maximizing Chapter 11. These 3 different processes that we're engaging in right now is using the bidding process, whereby rather than the predators coming along and saying, because Celsius owns them, we'll buy them and buy them cheap and give them to our shareholders, we can use the bidding process in order to give everybody their coins back in custody. Now, obviously, because they created fictitious synthetic balances and gambled our money, they don't all exist. So anything that was spent with our money, we're trying to get it where those securities are given to creditors so they can benefit from any upside rather than doing that. And I was in the court for Celsius trying to push those things through. We used the bidding process in order to do that, but it turns out that the court would much rather sell those assets, give them away in dollars. And I had a last Hail Mary to try and get it for Bitcoin, and that was denied on the first asset. And this is why we must fight to own our own money and own our own assets, because these court proceedings will end up, if this is not detected early enough, that those companies that are in Chapter 11 own the money and they can reinvest it into their next ideas and their next startups by simply using the exclusivity and the bankruptcy code, or they can sell those assets off to somebody else that wants to benefit from the upside. But what we need to do is set the precedent that any coins are left are returned in custody. Anything that they bought with those monies are returned as securities. Any legal claims are also given back to creditors so that anyone that got unjust benefit as a result of spending our own money illegally, owning our own money illegally, and using it to create additional balances when they lost it illegally without the licenses comes back to creditors. And that is the fight for the money, for your money. And then we need to look at how central bank digital currencies are going to disrupt the banking system. And we end up in this two-tiered world where the central bank owns the money, and you end up with Bitcoin and what we originally tried to create, with being able for you to actually own your own money, spend your own money, and have a fixed supply so that you don't actually get diluted based upon the whims of central bankers and centralized platforms that don't set things up with custody, securities, and if they are going to create money, then they're going to need all the banking protections that will come out as a result of that. And so always remember, this mission continues. So I'm going to head over to Twitter right now. If you enjoyed this video, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and share it with anybody else that's involved in Chapter 11. We didn't get the opportunity to present videos because it turned out that where we are right now is better for Celsius to own the money, but see if it goes that direction in your court case, because you can fight for your right to own money, use the process to ensure that you end up with your funds in custody and your securities owned by you using these processes. And we will continue to fight till the end for the additional assets and all the additional processes that happen. The first process is the auction. The second is if the company reorganizes, we need to ensure that they don't spend our money in a blank check and they end up issuing our assets to us and issuing our coins to us. And then if the unsecured creditor committee takes over, then they end up giving us back our coins in custody and giving the securities that they invested in and any claims on those legal issues as a result of the misrepresentations and the models that didn't have the licenses they needed end up where they belong for the benefit of creditors rather than other people's shareholders. So always remember, you're alive at one of the most interesting and exciting times in financial history. We always try and use financial innovation to solve complex problems, and that will continue throughout these Chapter 11 processes, and we'll fight for our right to own our own money till the end, and we'll do it with peace, we'll do it with love, we'll do it with unity. And I'm going to head over to Twitter Spaces right now at Simon Dixon Twit, and I'm going to start an AMA, and we'll do for 1 hour, answer as many questions as we can about the fight to own our money. Peace.